It can be liberating to get fired because you realize the world doesn't end. There are other ways to make money, better jobs. Ron Livington said that once. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Moving Forward Leadership Podcast, episode 34, How to Lead in an Employee Termination with Alison Gerlach. Hey everybody, it's your host and founder again, Scott McCarthy, here with the Moving Forward Leadership Podcast. Welcome. If it's your first time, welcome if it's your close to 50th time listening to the podcast. I enjoy all of you. But to recap what this show is about, it's a leadership podcast for anybody and everybody. Doesn't matter if you're in big business, small business, entrepreneur, CEO, nonprofit, dad or mom at home. Leadership's for everybody, and this podcast is for everybody. So again, welcome. I'm happy to have you here on board. Today we're going to be talking about a topic which is not an easy subject, honestly. Firing people, terminating them, getting rid of them, cutting the fat, as my host likes to mention it as. And sorry, not my host, my guest. I'm the host. Anyway, I like to include these bloopers sometimes, guys, because you know what? I'm a human being, and let's liven it up, especially when it's difficult topics like firing somebody. Anyway, my guest, Alison, she's got some serious history going on. She's a strategic management consultant. She's an entrepreneur. She's a large venture capitalist, investor, business executive, lecturer, instructor, consulted, etc., etc., etc. You know, she's worked with Fortune 100 companies and so on. Needless to say, she knows what she's talking about, and she will be point blank to say she knows what she's talking about in this topic. Okay, so I had to have her on for you guys. Before we dive into the show, I'm just going to point out one quick thing, and that is swing by the website, movingforwardleadership.com. Okay. And everything is there for you to find all the different resources that I have there, and social media and email, and all the show notes are there. And for the show notes for this episode, you're going to find them, and this is a change, so note this, just at movingforwardleadership.com/34. Okay? And just again, talking about the bloopers and, you know, keeping it a bit lively. This episode wasn't originally supposed to be 34. It was supposed to be another number. And I had mentioned in the interview that other number, but you'll hear it dubbed over later at the end of this episode. Change happens. Live with it. Move on, right? So anyway, sit back, relax, and enjoy my interview on a very serious topic of getting rid of the fat and firing and terminating employees with Alison Gerlach. Alison, welcome to the Moving Forward Leadership Podcast. It's great to have you on.
Thank you. It's my privilege to be here.
We finally hooked up, on to record this podcast after a month and a half of talking about it.
Yeah, all great conversations, though.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So one of the first things I like to do with my guests for the audience is, I allow them to give themselves just a quick background of who they are, where they come from, and basically how they got to where they are today. So why don't you start us off with that?
Sure. I'm here. I think you and I both have a very shared philosophy about building ventures of potentially significant long-term value. My background is I'm a math and economics major out of Cornell University, go Big Red. And then I took a very traditional business path. I was a strategic management consultant with Booz Allen and Hamilton. Great experience, wonderful place to cut your teeth, getting access and exposure to, the Fortune 100 C-suite of the world and their problems and how to come up with optimal solutions. Did business school at MIT Sloan School. And when I was there, really studied and focused on new product and venture development. And I think today that's now mostly referred to as entrepreneurship. Out of there, my thesis was actually optimizing the business startup process and the business high growth process to have your best chance at achieving an outcome of significantly high long-term value. And I also did quite a significant amount of work there in systems optimization. And I thought, well, what better system is there to look at than a company? And how do you start a company, especially having seen very large corporations from my consulting days that would get themselves entwined in these incredibly complex, difficult situations? How can you, from the start, build something in an optimized way so that you can best mitigate the challenges in front of you and really achieve that ideal exit or long-term planning that you want for your company? So from there, I started a few ventures. Every venture I have started, my exit has been to sell it to somebody who can do more with it than I can. I have also worked with a lot of folks in the venture community, helping early stage ventures get venture ready so that they're able to have the infrastructure and processes in place to be able to take on investment for high growth. I've worked even in the later stage of private equity, done a fair amount of merger and acquisitions throughout the years. And today I lecture, consult. I've taught in universities as well. I've never been a full-time professor, but I do love to teach. And I have occasionally taught a full course on optimally building your venture, building a business plan, how to pitch your venture, how to fund your venture. And now I consult, I lecture, and I am on the boards of several different companies. And I myself have a podcast called The Unapologetic Capitalist, where we talk about building your venture into substantial long-term value.
Wow. That's a lot. And you've been a busy lady for sure. And you must feel like you're having a break right now with with what you're doing, your podcast and consulting. Because I can only imagine there was probably some long hours and long days during those times.
I think all along, I always look at my career as, especially now that I've got a good 20 years of experience under my belt, I've always felt it's like a stool with all these different legs underneath. I love to teach, and I love giving office hours and mentoring students, especially folks that are in a business plan team or really trying to find their way. I love consulting to companies of all different stages. And I love still working with very early stage ventures where I roll my sleeves up and really help them drive and find that path to optimal growth. And I really feel like and even the more mature, the later stage, I have been an investor in a lot of early stage investors and in investors in sort of more mature. So I feel like all four of those things, investor, consultant, advisor, entrepreneur, and teacher, it's sort of, if any one of those legs were missing, the stool would be a little wobbly. But given all of those things, I feel like each one of those things makes me better at the other.
That's a really neat analogy. I like it a lot. So you're here today to talk about your whole ideology behind addition through subtraction. So can you just give like a very quick, 30,000 foot view overview of that ideology before we kind of dive into the nuts and bolts of it?
Sure. First of all, entrepreneurship in and of itself, especially early on, but even later when cash might not be as much of a squeeze as it is very early on, your two most precious resources always are time and dollars. Time is the one resource you will never, ever get back.
Oh, yeah.
And, cash hurts more at different times in your venture when you have or don't have it. But those two resources are so precious. And there will be times where you will be bringing people in that are extraordinary for your venture. And there will be times where you have people who will take both time and resource, your time and cash from you in a way that is so painful you can't sleep at night. And one of the reasons why I feel like this topic is so important is that throughout the years when I've been interviewed or on a panel or on a show like this, I often get asked, well, what is your greatest success? Or I'll get asked, what is your greatest failure? Mm-hmm. And without a doubt, it's the exact same thing. It's people. When you find a person and you develop them and they're such an integral part of building value in your company, in your venture, it's extraordinary. I mean, it really is something
100%
extraordinary. At the same time, when you have someone who just so profoundly disappoints you and destroys that very value that you poured your blood, sweat, and tears into, not just the venture, but when you've invested time and energy into that person, and they let you down in a way that is so hurtful, there's no greater failure than having brought in the wrong person or people, or, and it's not just you personally. Like I said, personally, it hurts more than anything, but the venture suffers so severely. And it's a topic people are very fearful to discuss. But it's so important. It's so important to be able to recognize early, to have a clear framework of assessment to say, is there an opportunity to turn the bus around? And then if there is, then there needs to be another one to make sure you're accountable for that turnaround. And if there isn't, that you're able to, like I say, eradicate that, sort of difficult person or people or area from your company as quickly and painlessly as possible, so that you're really trimming the fat, not cutting into muscle.
Yeah. I always, I have what I like to refer to as ownership style. So I always take the blame kind of myself. I always put a square right on my shoulders, and it's like, yeah, this person's not working out, and you know what? It's my fault. I didn't properly mentor them. I didn't properly train them. Or ultimately, I didn't properly recognize that this person is not going to fit into my organization in the end. And it's kind of what you're getting at there. So, no, people.
Well, at some point, you've got to recognize: am I trying to force a square peg into a round hole?
Oh yeah, no, for sure. You can only try for so long, and then you realize that you've exhausted all avenues, and in the end,
and you want to do right by a person. You need to see them as an individual. But one of the mantras I always have is that the needs of the venture have to take priority over anyone's individual wants, including your own. And the one thing I would want to sort of change in that, it's my fault. Oh, it's take the blame. Don't take the blame. Take responsibility.
Yeah, same thing. Yeah, no, for sure. And that's kind of what I'm getting at, for sure. So that's definitely a good 30,000 foot overview there. I would assume that the first thing you would have to do would be, recognize that there's a problem, and that's going to be glaring. But what are some aspects of that you can break out and explain to the audience out there?
Problems aren't always glaring. Sometimes they're bubbling under the surface, and it's amazing how far someone can get without really having thrown up any flares. And it's only in retrospect that you look back and go, oh my God, how did I not see that happening?
Yeah. Hindsight's 20/20, right?
Absolutely. And don't we all wish we had those hindsight glasses that
I know.
we can look at? That would be a great product, some sort of eyewear that was contained future hindsight. So if anyone comes up with that, give me a buzz. I'm happy to fund that venture.
I'm willing to jump in as well.
But really, there's different types of times where you really have to do the sort of addition by subtraction. Sometimes there's legacy folks within the company that have been there for years and years, but they're obsolete now, and they've just been there so long. So there's almost this habitual, they need to stick around, even though they actually are a significant drain on the company. So those, I sort of say, you have to find the category of why they're not working. Is it that they've become obsolete? That they haven't necessarily done anything wrong other than boy, they haven't. This is very common in sales, actually. And some of that is someone who's a lifelong salesperson, and maybe they were extremely successful in a certain era, but they sort of rested on the laurels of the success that they had all through the 90s. Well, things are done differently now. Nobody, in fact, a lot of the younger folks when I talk about hiring a salesperson with a great Rolodex, they wonder if I'm talking about a watch and just mispronounced it. The whole notion of how you network today is different. How you reach out to people is different. And it's not that those folks don't have a significant amount of wisdom to impart and relationships that are important, but a lot of times they really have become obsolete. They have become incredibly expensive. And they could be a drain on the company, and it's that one's hard to recognize. It's also very painful to recognize because you probably like them a lot.
You've probably known that person for 10, 15, 20 plus years, right?
Sure. So I sort of say you have to recognize the situation. Now there's also the situation of, gee, we did our best in our hiring processes, but still someone came in and then pulled a Jekyll and Hyde on us and not sure what happened. And that's where you really have to say, boy, we found someone because we were enamored with some part of them that we believed would add value to the company. But now that they're here, it's just not working out. And that's always hard because there's a lot of different ways and I've seen this happen in very large tech companies where a board has brought in a CEO or a COO or someone of high profile, and the board has really made the decision as largely driven by PR, let's say. Boy, this would be a really good hire because look at the PR we're going to get. And because of that, they figure, well, we got to really make this work because if we hired this person, did all this PR, it looks good. And now we're going to say, gee, sorry, it didn't work. We're going to look bad. And that person ends up sticking around way too long and takes away a significant amount of the company's value. And oh, by the way, you're also paying them through the nose. And then there's really the folks that genuinely, maybe they started out on a good path and it just sort of fell to pieces. You just don't know. The one thing that is, I think, surprising to me is that I still get surprised. I mean, these are people, they're human. Some of the stories I have, I could tell you people I hired and were phenomenal. And then what ended up happening, you'd swear I was making it up. I couldn't make it up. There's some things that just happen, and it's only because people are human.
Yeah, no, for sure. What's going on in the background? You don't know what's happening on the personal front, the family front. All these things could have major factors, right?
And so that's why I always say it's so important to assess the situation of why is this person starting to detract value from the company. Mm-hmm. You always have to start from there because there is no cookie cutter solution of here's how we do it. Let's make sure we always sit. I mean, I think in business school, they teach you, always fire someone at the end of the day on Friday.
Oh God, no.
That's when they're used because that's when they're used to going home. And that's when they, are going to be in their routine. You're not taking them out of their routine. And the next time they're going to think about it is not going to be till Monday. So they have all that cooling off time. That might be appropriate. It might not be. But again, really, I think the whole essence of how you start to have those conversations has to be derivative of why is the person taking value from the company? And then the next step goes into, is there any opportunity to turn the bus around?
Yeah. I was going to say, you identified a problem, but I don't think the next step would be diving into immediately getting rid of that person. So what are some things that people can do to help try to turn the bus or proverbial boat around before we have to go to that, ultimate end game?
Again, it sort of depends on the why. Like if it's somebody who truly has become just obsolete, really the first way that you start to even assess whether or not there's a chance to, either phase that person out, you can move them into a different role. I often talk about using terms like moving on, moving up, rather than getting out. And you can look and say, is there a different role, say an advisory role, a board role, or some other kind of role that might be more suited to what the person wants?
Mm-hmm.
I think the first thing that needs to happen in assessing, is there an opportunity to turn the bus around, is to sit and, like I said, answer the why, but then sit and talk to them and say, and listen to them and say, how do you view the situation? Do your best to understand their perspective. Because if their perspective is they already have a foot out the door, then what's going to be the point of, then fine, open the barn door,
Yeah,
suggest
fair
they
enough.
run. I mean, so the second step really is listening to them. Find out their perspective, their why. What do they want? What is their hope? Maybe the next step is truly helping them into a different role that's going to be better aligned with their goals and their personal situation, or however that's going to work out.
Or even skill sets, if it's a performance related thing, not necessarily an attitude related thing or conduct related thing, maybe, find a position that better lines up with what their skill sets are. And we kind of,
Absolutely.
I talked with this on another podcast episode with a gentleman named Terrence Hughes, who used Strengths Finder in his small business to find out what strengths everybody had, and he ended up actually changing a few people's roles. And it's something similar that someone can use in this situation, I would think.
Absolutely. I think that, like I said, I can't emphasize enough just how important the whole notion of really listening to another person's perspective. Keep an open mind, because working with someone is always going to be better than in your head coming up with, oh gosh, they're going to be defensive, they're going to be this, and you're assuming this whole situation that may never even happen.
Mm-hmm.
And you really want to look at it and say, well, the end of the day, what you want to do is align the needs of your venture with their individual wants or needs. That's the most you can do, is align those things. And the whole answering the question of, can you turn the bus around, lies in there. If there's an opportunity to align their needs and wants with building value in the company and the needs of the company, then yes, you have an opportunity to turn the bus around by getting that person better trained. Sometimes it's really just a lack of information. Changing even the communication structure within your company. I would say a lot of conflict. The number one, I can actually tell you, data has shown over the last 20 years, the number one cause of conflict inside of an organization is perceived misinformation. It's not even actual misinformation. It's just perceived.
Yeah, I could have took those words out of your mouth there.
It's no surprise to anybody. So sometimes conflict has happened. Someone's upset and not able to function their job because they think something is being kept from them, or someone's got a one up on them. So it could just be a change in how information's flowing, making sure that person has access to the right people, the right information. But again, until you, like I said, first, why are you in this situation? Second, what is their perspective? Listen to their perspective. And then third, is there an opportunity to align, here are the needs of the venture with their individual needs and wants?
No, for sure. And that perceived miscommunication aspect is so prevalent ever. And as you said, it's the number one reason for conflict in organizations, which does not surprise me one bit. So, let's assume there is a problem within a person. We've had that talk with them. We've attempted to turn the car around, try to get things lined up properly, and it's just still not working. What's the next thing that a leader can do?
I think the most important thing is all along the way that you have given a process that to not just this person, but every person in your company feels is reliable and trustworthy. That's hard to do if this is your very early stage and this is the first time you've done it.
Mm-hmm.
But with any process, a reputation of reliability and transparency and justice and fairness and consistency is really important. And so if you can sort of develop that, and again, derive it from this person's perspective, well, you need to align it with the company's needs. And the reason why I say this is because what you really want to avoid is a situation of the person being defensive, which is almost certainly going to happen at some point. Anytime you have discord, I would say the very best way to extinguish any sort of embers or burgeoning fire or even a blaze is to suck the oxygen out of it. Don't throw kerosene on it. Don't think opening a window and, that's going to burn the whole house down.
Yeah.
So it's very important to ensure that you are doing your best to, again, like I say, suck the oxygen out of the fire. And so I always feel like the most successful terminations of any kind of relationship have always come from the perspective of, I want the best for you. I want the best for us. And I'm opening the barn doors, and I support you deciding to run into greener pastures. And that is really sort of the most you can hope for, is that you have a relationship that can be terminated in a way that isn't, so dramatic, or it doesn't feel draconian in any way. And you don't have someone, because you have to remember that outside of this one person, you still have a company to run.
Mm-hmm.
And so every one of these times that you have to let someone go, whether it's a layoff situation, whether it's a performance situation, whether it's a skill set, poorly matched situation, what have you, you still have a company to run. And you're going to have to do this again at another time. Or you don't want people to be left very fearful once this person is left, because then you're going to have a whole bunch of people who are afraid and defensive, and that's really going to sink, and that's going to cause ripple effect long after that person's gone.
Yeah, for sure. And that's kind of one of my biggest concerns in my mind right now. And maybe you would have some advice for the leaders out there. If you've terminated an employee, how can a leader go about reinstilling confidence with the rest of the employees that, it's not coming, it's not around the corner for the rest of them?
I think the best way to do that is to really have an air of trust and transparency. Transparency doesn't mean you share everything, because too much information makes people fearful as well. And there's information that might be sort of beyond the understanding of certain employees, and by sort of availing themselves of it might make them fearful. A really effective leader is going to be able to say, I'm going to be transparent about these things. You can only earn that. I actually heard something recently that I really, really loved, which is respect is earned, but dignity should be just expected. So if you ensure that you have always treated people with dignity, to a point where you have earned respect, and the road to earning respect comes through having a process that, again, is reliable, it's consistent, it feels just, it feels fair. And if people feel listened to, that's why I always say that critical step of listening is so, so important, then you have a much better shot of folks respecting you. And once you've earned that respect, and people really have seen that over and over again, you have been transparent about answering questions when appropriate, about sharing data that really will help people understand what their place is within the company. I mean, it all goes back to organizational structure and organizational process. A really good one means that everyone in the company understands their role in contributing to the long-term value of the company.
No, that all makes great sense, actually. And it's very clear.
It's also easier said than done.
Oh, everything is. That's why I love podcasting about leadership. I don't have to exercise it. That is a complete joke. So in my mind right now, there's basically ultimately two different types of terminations, right? You're in a downsizing scenario, or you're in some kind of scenario with an individual, for whatever reason, right or wrong, it's just not working out with that individual. What are some things that a leader must take into consideration for both of those scenarios before they go ahead and execute the termination, or terminations, I should say?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, you have to recognize what you don't want value to be walking out the door with that person.
Mm.
So to understand what value that person has added, even though right now it's clearly the cost benefit of having them has flipped over heavily into the cost side, there's likely some value that they have, whether that's relationships that they have with vendors or partners or folks that they've sold to. To protect the value that they have created for the company, to make sure that doesn't go out the door with them, is critical. And the second piece is to really mitigate the fear and concern that you have in any way treated them unjustly. Because I think, I live in the U.S. We are an incredibly litigious society. It is, it's sport here, and for better or for worse, mostly for worse in this case. I've seen a lot of companies keep people around far longer past their expiration date because they were fearful of being sued or somehow smeared. And we live in the day and age of social media where I think there's this panic of, oh my God, they're just going to trash us and it's going to go viral. And then we have this whole mess to deal with. And I think to have that fear is completely rational, but you can't make your decisions based on fear. A fear-based decision never, ever works out well. And if you're ever sitting there thinking, well, the longer we keep them around, you're waiting for a bomb to blow up. Like if we keep them around, the bomb won't explode. That's also really detracting from the value of your company. And that's why to do it in a way that you can feel like you have done right, you've treated this person in the situation with dignity, and you have done it in a way that is consistent with how you would handle it no matter who that person was, regardless of their age, regardless of their race, regardless of, whatever other unique aspect they might have, then that's really the most you can do. And know that you can't control the other stuff. There's no way. And I think a lot of leaders err in trying to control some sort of explosion that may or may not ever happen, and end up, have a wound that just festers over time because they're so afraid of it.
Yeah. I always say to my guys, regardless of the situation, it could be something as extreme as termination or, disciplining someone or something like that. Just if you keep to the moral high ground, you will come out on top in the end. Like just as long as you're following what the rules are, the policies are, and applying it across the board in an even manner, and you stay to the moral high ground, regardless of what other individuals doing, saying, it'll be, in the end, you'll be fine. And I think it would apply to much of a similar situation.
Yeah, and it's still going to hurt. I mean,
no, it's not easy for sure.
People spouting off or doing what they have to do to vent. I think the key for any effective leader is you can't let that stymie you. You can't let the fear of, somebody spousing off who knows what. You can't let that change effective decision making. And you also can't waste your precious, again, time is a resource you'll never ever get back. And the more time you spend trying to control that which you have no hope of ever controlling, that's what's most important, is that you look and say, here are the things about the situation that I can control, and I'm going to do the most I can to be righteous by it. And that's really the most I can do. And at the end of the day, things may or may not happen that are going to be painful. And anyone who says, by the way, oh, I don't care what they say about me, come on, we're all human. That stuff, it's horrible. It's terrible if somebody's going to badmouth you or say something. But what you can't do is pretend that there's something you can do to control whether or not somebody else behaves badly.
Yeah, for sure. Only worry about the things you can control within your sphere of influence, right? As I've seen.
Well, and I'd love to say and sleep well at night, but I've lost many nights sleep over.
Haven't we all? I think anybody in any leadership position will. Also, I got just a couple more questions for you. Do you have any other final advice for any leader there that will be finding them in this type of scenario where they're going to have to terminate an employee or employees that we haven't covered yet?
I think it's really important to have some mentor, advisor, spouse, some sort of support system that you can go to and be completely and thoroughly honest. But this person has to be someone who is not invested in any way in the company. Because you need to have someone you can go to completely penalty-free, where you can vent and you can be vulnerable and you can really just, have a catharsis that is penalty-free. If you have that outlet, I really think that's actually the most important thing you can have. And hopefully that's somebody who can tell you, you need to take time, think about this first, or because as leaders, we're human too. We might act very viscerally about something that really ticks us off, and that might not be appropriate. So to have, like I said, this outside person or place that you can go to penalty-free, just be able to lose it in however way you need, to have a sounding board, even to have just a mirror, someone who can hold up a mirror so you can feel like, all right, I have this support, I have the perspective to help keep you on solid ground. I feel like that's the number one important thing, not just in situations like this, but for any success, to have that. I can't think of any more important tool than that to have.
I feel that is a perfect tie-in for me to put out a shameless plug for the Moving Forward Leadership Mastermind, because that is exactly the reason why I've developed it, to allow people to come in and ask for advice and to vent and to engage with, myself and the guests, all the guests that I invite to the mastermind. So audience, feel free to swing by movingforwardleadership.com/mastermind and dive in, because this is exactly what it's here for. Alison, this has been eye-opening interviews. I've got a lot of takeaways. I've taken a number of notes here. I got one last question, which I throw to all my guests.
Sure.
And that is, in your mind, what makes a great leader?
A great leader is somebody who, on a regular basis, asks themselves if they're the right leader.
Ooh.
And not only that, but are willing to think about that with an open mind and an open heart. Those are the two greatest things you can bring into any room, is an open mind and open heart. But a really effective leader, and like I said before, is somebody who will not only consistently ask the question if they're the right person, but they're the ones that take responsibility. They won't place blame, not even upon themselves, but they will take responsibility.
I come from a military background. We refer to it as a self-check. You go and you ask yourself, and I'll throw out a quick little story there. No names are packed, as we refer to as pack drill, but I know of an individual who, while in Afghanistan, their convoy came under an IED strike, and there was a number of casualties and so on and so forth. And he was the leader of that convoy. And then finally, at the end, his second in command looked at him and said, "Sir, self-check." And he kind of looked at himself. He was injured himself. And then he said, "Yep." And then he got on the medevac helicopter and eventually was pulled out of Afghanistan due to his wounds. So,
wow.
Yeah, it's, you kind of you don't have to go to that extreme. You don't have to be bleeding out or anything, but the moral of the story is there. As a leader, you eventually have to go, and it's for the betterment of the organization.
Well, again, the needs of the venture have to take priority over not just yours, anyone's individual wants, your want to be the leader, your want to be liked. And even in this conversation, it's very hard to talk about terminating relationships because people want to be liked. It's a human desire. So you have to put the value and the long-term needs of the venture above your individual wants.
Yep, for sure. So I'm going to turn the microphone over to you for 30 seconds or so. How can people reach out to you? How can they follow you? Whatever.
Sure. You can find me at unapologeticcapitalist.com. In fact, I have an episode on this very topic of addition by subtraction. It's episode 21. So if you go to unapologeticcapitalist.com/21, you'll get to the episode. You can email me. I'm at THEUC at unapologeticcapitalist.com. I'm also on Twitter at ABGERLACH. That's at AB Gerlach.
Perfect. And for the audience out there, I'm going to link all this up in the show notes as always. So if you just go to
Great.
movingforwardleadership.com/34, you're going to find all of these links in there. Alison, again, thank you for coming out, taking your time to talk to the audience on a topic which unfortunately isn't necessarily always easy to discuss, but you make it easy for some reason.
Well, it's an important topic. I'll grant you that. And I appreciate it. This has truly been my privilege.
Awesome. And for the audience out there, as always, stand by because I'll have my key takeaways from this discussion with Alison today. Thanks, Alison.
Thank you.
Hey, everybody. I hope that you enjoyed that episode there with Alison. Difficult topic, difficult subject. But you know what? That is the job of a leader. We are faced with difficult decisions day in, day out, and you can't find yourself caught off guard. So that's kind of my 2 cents and point of view here. Make sure, regardless, you have to be prepared. And unfortunately, at the end of the day, everybody leaves the company or your organization. And unfortunately, some people don't leave it on the best of terms. So here are my key takeaways from my interview there with Alison. And the first one is, as she said, people are our greatest successes and our greatest failures. And that's so true if you think about it, right? All of my, when I think about it and reflect about it, and all my greatest successes in my career thus far have all been revolving around people. Seeing people develop, helping people in different ways, supporting organizations. Yeah, it's all been through people. So, and on that other side of the coin, some of the greatest failures I've had is seeing people go the wrong path, down the wrong ways, and unfortunately having to take actions and not being able to do anything about it. It's hard, and unfortunately it's something that you have to do regardless. So just keep those in mind. The next one, termination isn't necessarily always negative. Think about it. A lot of very successful people started the path of their success because they've been fired from a previous job. And sometimes it's a matter of timing, i.e. to get fired and another position is open in another company where they end up thriving at. Another time it's a mental gut check and people start realizing that, hey, you know what? I have more to offer than what the last company believes I had. So it's not always negative. It's positive as well. It could be positive for the person, and it's going to be positive for the organization because, at the end of the day, if a person is not performing to the level that you expect them, as Alison said, they're going to be either sucking time and or money out of your organization, and you just can't afford that as a leader. And the final key takeaway I have is the need to protect the value that the individual has before they leave, right? That person has key contacts, has a position in the company that things need to get done by, So what type of key value do they have? You have to identify that and make sure to figure out a way to keep that within your organization before they leave so that it doesn't go out the door with them, because the impact is going to be greater than what you even perceive it to be. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed this episode here today with Alison. I know I did. It's a tough topic, as I said, but it's one that we need to have this conversation around and discuss, okay? So keep those things in mind, and remember, keep pushing, keep trying, keep moving forward. Take care now.